The dust swirled around Isaac Xavier's boots as he guided his horse through the small cemetery on the outskirts of Great Bend, Kansas, noticing a woman in black kneeling before a weathered wooden cross, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs that made something in his chest tighten with unexpected sympathy. It was late September in 1881, and the afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the prairie, turning the air thick and heavy. Isaac had been riding for 3 days straight from Dodge City, his muscles aching and his throat parched, when he decided to cut through the cemetery as a shortcut to the town proper. He hadn't expected to find anyone there, especially not a woman alone and so visibly devastated. Isaac slowed his horse to a stop, considering whether he should continue on and leave her to her grief. Something held him back, though, some quality in the way her spine curved with sorrow, the way her gloved hands pressed against the grave marker as if she could somehow reach through the earth to whoever lay beneath. He dismounted quietly, tying his horse to a nearby fence post, and approached with careful steps. She didn't seem to hear him at first, lost in whatever memories consumed her. Isaac cleared his throat gently, not wanting to startle her. The woman's head lifted slightly, though she didn't turn around. Up close, he could see the fine trembling in her hands, the way her breath hitched between quiet sobs. "Madam," Isaac said softly, his voice rough from days of riding through dusty plains, "I don't mean to intrude on your grief." She finally turned then, and Isaac found himself looking into the reddened but still striking face of a woman who couldn't have been much older than 23 or 24. Her dark hair was pulled back beneath a simple black bonnet, and her gray eyes shimmered with unshed tears. There was something fierce in her expression even through the grief, a strength that hadn't been broken despite whatever loss had brought her here. "You're not from Great Bend," she said, her voice hoarse. "It wasn't a question." "No, madam. Just passing through on my way to Colorado." "Name's Isaac Xavier." He removed his hat respectfully, holding it against his chest. "I didn't mean to disturb you, but I couldn't just ride past without offering my condolences." The woman looked at him for a long moment, studying his face as if trying to determine whether he was genuine or simply another drifter with questionable intentions. Whatever she saw must have satisfied her, because her expression softened slightly. "Thank you," she whispered, turning back to the grave. Fresh flowers lay scattered across the mound of earth, wildflowers that must have been picked that morning. Isaac should have left then. He had places to be, a job waiting for him at a ranch outside of Denver. But something kept his feet planted in the dusty ground, kept him standing there in respectful silence as this stranger grieved. Finally, he heard himself speak words he hadn't planned to say. "Tell me about them." The woman's head turned sharply toward him, surprise evident in her features. "What?" "The person you're mourning. Tell me about them." Isaac gestured toward a nearby tree, its sparse shade offering at least some relief from the relentless sun. "Sometimes it helps to talk, especially to a stranger who's got no expectations or judgments." She looked at him with those penetrating gray eyes, and Isaac felt something shift in his chest, some recognition that this moment mattered in ways he couldn't yet understand. Then, to his surprise, she nodded slowly and rose to her feet, brushing the dust from her black skirts. They walked together to the shade of the cottonwood tree, and she settled herself on a weathered bench that had been placed there for mourners. Isaac sat beside her, leaving a respectful distance between them, and waited. "Her name was Lily," the woman began, her voice barely above a whisper. "Lily Elizabeth Johnson, my sister. My twin sister, actually." Isaac felt his throat tighten. Twin sisters. The bond between them must have been extraordinary. "She died 3 weeks ago," the woman continued, her fingers twisting the fabric of her skirts. "Fever took her in just 5 days." One moment she was laughing and planning her wedding, and the next, her voice broke and she had to pause to collect herself. "I'm sorry. I'm Teresa Jane Johnson. People call me Tess." "I'm sorry for your loss, Miss Johnson," Isaac said quietly. "I can't imagine what it must be like to lose a twin." Tess let out a shaky breath. "It feels like half of me is gone. We did everything together from the moment we were born. We had our own language as children, finished each other's sentences. People in town could barely tell us apart. My parents used to tie different colored ribbons in our hair just to keep us straight." She smiled then, a sad, distant expression that made Isaac's heart ache. "Lily was supposed to marry Thomas Garrett in 2 weeks. He was a good man, owned a shop in town. They were so happy together, so ready to start their lives. And then the fever came and it took her so fast." "Where are your parents?" Isaac asked gently. "Dead these past 4 years. A wagon accident on the road to Kansas City. It was just Lily and me after that. We ran a small dress shop together, made enough to get by. Now it's just me, and I don't." She pressed her hands to her face. "I don't know how to exist in a world where she doesn't." Isaac found himself reaching out, his hand hovering uncertainly before he gently placed it on her shoulder. "You keep going because that's what she would want. You honor her memory by living the life she can't." Tess looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. "That's what everyone keeps saying, but they don't understand. How do I live for two people? How do I be enough when I was only ever meant to be half of a whole?" "You don't have to be enough right now," Isaac said softly. "You just have to be. One breath at a time, one day at a time. The rest will come." They sat in silence for a while, the only sounds the whisper of wind through the sparse grass and the distant call of a crow. Isaac didn't know why he felt so compelled to stay, why this woman's grief affected him so profoundly. He'd seen plenty of sorrow in his 27 years, had experienced his own share of loss. But something about Tess, about the raw honesty of her pain, made him want to help, to somehow ease her burden. "What were you doing out here?" Tess asked eventually, wiping at her eyes with a handkerchief. "You said you were passing through." "Heading to Colorado for ranch work," Isaac replied. "Been doing cattle drives and ranch hand work since I was 15. Saved up enough to maybe start thinking about my own place someday, but for now I go where the work is." "That sounds lonely," Tess observed. Isaac shrugged. "It can be, but there's a freedom in it too. No ties, no obligations, just the open road and wherever it leads." "I used to think I wanted that," Tess said quietly. "Adventure, travel, seeing places beyond Great Bend. But Lily, she loved this town. She never wanted to leave. So I stayed." She paused. "I don't regret it. Every extra day I had with her was a gift. I just wish I'd had more." The sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Isaac realized he'd been sitting here for over an hour, and he hadn't once thought about continuing his journey. He should go, should find a boarding house for the night and move on at first light. Instead, he heard himself saying, "Would you like some company for supper?" "I mean, if it wouldn't be inappropriate. I just thought you might not want to be alone tonight." Tess looked at him with surprise, and for a moment Isaac worried he'd overstepped. Then a small, tentative smile crossed her face. "That would be nice, actually. There's a decent restaurant in town. Nothing fancy, but the food is good." They walked together back through the cemetery, Isaac leading his horse alongside them. Tess paused at her sister's grave one more time, laying her hand gently on the wooden cross. "I'll be back tomorrow, Lily," she whispered. "I promise." Great Bend was a modest town, its main street lined with wooden buildings and false fronts that tried to make everything look grander than it was. The restaurant Tess led him to was a small establishment run by a German couple. the aroma of roasting meat and fresh bread making Isaac's stomach growl with hunger he'd been ignoring all day. They settled into a corner table, and Isaac was aware of the curious glances from other diners. A strange cowboy dining with a woman in mourning would certainly fuel gossip, but Tess seemed unconcerned. She ordered for both of them, clearly familiar with the menu, and then leaned back in her chair with visible exhaustion. "Tell me about your family," she said to Isaac. "It seems only fair since I've told you about mine." Isaac took a drink of water, considering his words. "Not much to tell, honestly. My parents had a small farm outside of Abilene. Good people, worked hard. I had 2 younger brothers. They all died of cholera when I was 17. Tess's eyes filled with sympathy. "I'm so sorry." "It was 10 years ago now," Isaac said, though the pain of that memory never fully faded. "I buried them, sold the farm to pay off their debts, and started drifting. Didn't see much point in settling down after that." "Is that why you stopped for me?" Tess asked perceptively. "Because you know what loss feels like." "Maybe," Isaac admitted. "Or maybe I just couldn't ride past someone in pain without trying to help. My mother always said I had too soft a heart for the world we live in." Their food arrived then, generous portions of roast beef, potatoes, and vegetables. They ate in companionable silence for a while, and Isaac found himself relaxing in Tess's presence in a way he rarely did with strangers. There was something genuine about her, a lack of pretense that he appreciated. "What will you do now?" Isaac asked. "With the dress shop, I mean, will you keep it running?" Tess sighed. "I don't know. I've been trying to keep up with the orders we had, but my heart isn't in it anymore. Everything there reminds me of her. Her needle cushion on the work table, her unfinished projects, the dress she was making for her wedding." Her voice caught. "I haven't been able to touch that one yet." "You don't have to decide everything right now," Isaac said gently. "Give yourself time to grieve." "Everyone keeps saying that," Tess said with a hint of frustration. "But time doesn't stop, does it? Bills still need to be paid. Customers still need their orders. Life keeps demanding things from me when all I want is to curl up and disappear for a while." Isaac understood that feeling more than he could express. After his family died, he'd spent months in a fog, going through the motions of living without really being present. It was only the necessity of survival that had eventually pulled him back. "What if you had help?" he found himself saying. "Just for a little while until you get your feet back under you." Tess looked at him with confusion. "What do you mean? You're a cowboy. What do you know about dressmaking?" "Nothing," Isaac admitted with a small smile. "But I know about bookkeeping and dealing with customers and handling the business side of things. My mother ran her own business selling preserves and baked goods. I helped her with it before. Well, before. I could help you with the shop, just the practical parts, while you decide what you want to do." "You were on your way to Colorado," Tess pointed out. "You have a job waiting for you." Isaac shrugged. "Jobs are always waiting somewhere. This feels more important." He couldn't quite explain why he was making this offer, even to himself. He'd known this woman for only a few hours, but something in him recognized a kindred spirit, someone who needed help in a way he understood. And maybe, if he was honest, he was tired of drifting. Tired of moving from place to place with no real purpose beyond survival. Tess studied him for a long moment, and Isaac could see the debate playing out behind her eyes. Finally, she said, "Why would you do this for a complete stranger?" "Because someone should," Isaac replied simply. "And I'm here and I can." "I can't pay you much," Tess warned. "The shop does okay, but it's not making enough to support 2 people. "I've got savings," Isaac said. "Enough to get by for a few months. By then, maybe you'll have figured out what you want and I can move on. Or not. We'll see how it goes." Tess was quiet for so long that Isaac thought she was going to refuse. Then she nodded slowly. "All right. For a few weeks, maybe, just until I can think straight again." They finished their meal and Isaac walked Tess back to her home, a small house behind the dress shop that she'd shared with her sister. The windows were dark, and Isaac could see her hesitation before opening the door. "It's the going inside that's hardest," she said quietly. "Knowing she won't be there, that she'll never be there again." "Would you like me to come in for a moment?" Isaac offered. "Just to make sure everything's all right." Tess nodded gratefully and Isaac followed her inside. The house was tidy and feminine, with lace curtains and carefully arranged furniture. Two of everything, Isaac noticed. 2 chairs by the fireplace, 2 cups on the kitchen table, 2 coats hanging by the door, the physical evidence of a life built for 2 people who were no longer both present. "I should probably get those down," Tess said, following his gaze to the second coat, "and pack away her things, but I can't seem to make myself do it." "There's no rush," Isaac assured her. "Do it when you're ready, not when someone else thinks you should be." Tess managed a small smile. "You're very kind, Isaac Xavier. I'm grateful you happened to ride through Great Bend today." "So am I," Isaac said, and realized he meant it completely. He left her then, finding a boarding house down the street and paying for a week's stay. As he lay in the narrow bed that night, staring at the ceiling, Isaac wondered what he'd gotten himself into. This wasn't like him, this stopping, this getting involved in someone else's troubles. He'd spent 10 years avoiding exactly this kind of connection, this kind of potential pain. But when he closed his eyes, he saw Tess's face, saw the raw grief and the fierce strength coexisting in her expression, and he knew he'd made the right choice. He'd stay as long as she needed him, and maybe, just maybe, help her find her way back to living. The next morning, Isaac met Tess at the dress shop at 8 o'clock. The storefront was modest but well-maintained, with a painted sign that read "Johnson Sisters Fine Dressmaking" hanging above the door. Tess was already inside, standing in the middle of the workroom looking lost. "I came in early to try to work on some orders," she explained as Isaac entered. "But I just keep standing here, not knowing where to start." Isaac looked around the room, taking in the organized chaos of fabric bolts, half-finished dresses on forms, and neat rows of thread and notions. "Why don't you show me what needs to be done, and we'll make a plan." They spent the next hour going through the current orders. 3 everyday dresses for local women, a Sunday suit for a farmer, and 2 complicated formal gowns for a wealthy family passing through. Tess explained what work remained on each piece, her voice steadier when she focused on the practical details. "The formal gowns are the most urgent," she said. "The family is staying at the hotel for another 2 weeks while they wait for their railroad connections. They've already paid a deposit." "Can you finish them in time?" Isaac asked. Tess nodded slowly. "If I can focus, yes. Lily and I were both fast workers. She trailed off. "How about this?" Isaac suggested. "You work on the sewing, which I definitely can't help with. I'll handle customers who come in, take care of the bookkeeping, and maybe organize the shop a bit. Keep the business running while you focus on the work you need to do." It seemed like a reasonable division of labor, and Tess agreed with visible relief. Isaac spent the morning familiarizing himself with the shop's records, which were meticulously maintained in a large ledger. The Johnson sisters had built a solid business over the past 4 years, with a steady stream of customers and reasonable profits. Nothing lavish, but enough to live on comfortably. Around mid-morning, the bell above the shop door jingled and a middle-aged woman entered. She looked surprised to see Isaac behind the counter. "Can I help you, madam?" Isaac asked politely. "I'm here to pick up my dress," the woman said, eyeing him suspiciously. "Is Teresa available?" Tess emerged from the back room at the sound of her name. "Mrs. Patterson, hello, your dress is ready," Let me get it for you. As Tess wrapped the dress in brown paper, Mrs. Patterson leaned toward Isaac conspiratorially. Are you family? I hadn't heard that Teresa had any relatives coming to town. Just a friend helping out, Isaac replied diplomatically. Mrs. Patterson looked like she wanted to ask more questions, but Tess handed her the wrapped package before she could. After the woman left, Tess let out a long breath. I'm sorry about that, she said. Small-town curiosity. Your presence here is going to cause quite a bit of talk. Let them talk, Isaac said with a shrug. We know the truth, and that's all that matters. They fell into a routine over the following days. Isaac handled the front of the shop while Tess worked in the back, the sound of her sewing machine a constant rhythm throughout the day. He found himself enjoying the work more than he'd expected, like the orderliness of keeping the books and the simple satisfaction of helping customers. What surprised him most was how much he looked forward to the meals they shared. Tess would close the shop at noon for lunch, and they'd eat together in her kitchen, talking about everything and nothing. She told him stories about growing up as a twin, about the mischief she and Lily had gotten into as children. He shared memories of his brothers, stories he hadn't told anyone in years. You must miss them terribly, Tess said one afternoon, as they sat on her back porch eating sandwiches. Every day, Isaac admitted, but the sharp edge of it has worn down over time. It's more of a dull ache now, something I carry with me but can mostly function around. Does it really get better? Tess asked, her voice small. Everyone keeps saying it will, but I can't imagine feeling anything other than this crushing weight. It gets different, Isaac said carefully. Not better exactly, but more manageable. You learn to live with it, to build your life around the absence instead of being consumed by it. Tess was quiet for a moment. Thank you for being honest. Everyone else just tells me platitudes. As the days turned into weeks, Isaac watched Tess slowly begin to emerge from the fog of grief. She smiled more often, laughed at his jokes occasionally. The formal gowns were completed and delivered to much praise from the wealthy family. New orders came in. The shop continued to function. But Isaac was also aware of something else growing between them, something neither of them had acknowledged aloud. The way his heart lifted when she walked into a room. The way she seemed to lean toward him when they talked. The accidental brushes of hands that sent electricity through his entire body. He told himself it was too soon, that she was vulnerable and grieving, that he had no right to feel this way about a woman he'd known for less than a month. But the feelings persisted, growing stronger with each passing day. One evening in late October, nearly 6 weeks after Isaac had first arrived in Great Bend, they were working late to finish a rush order. Tess was putting the final touches on a wedding dress, her needle moving with practiced precision, when she suddenly stopped and set down her work. Isaac, she said quietly, can I ask you something? Of course, he replied, looking up from the ledger he'd been reviewing. Why are you still here? The question caught him off guard. What do you mean? You said you'd stay a few weeks, help me get back on my feet. It's been 6 weeks now. The shop is running smoothly, I'm managing better. You don't owe me anything, but you're still here. She met his eyes. Why? Isaac set down his pen, his heart pounding. This was it, the moment where he could either be honest or retreat into comfortable lies. He chose honesty. Because I don't want to leave, he said simply. Because somewhere along the way, helping you stopped being an obligation and became something I wanted to do. Because I wake up every morning looking forward to seeing you, and the thought of riding away from Great Bend makes me feel like I'd be leaving something important behind. Tess drew in a sharp breath. Isaac, I know it's too soon, he continued quickly. I know you're still grieving Lily and I'm not trying to pressure you into anything, but you asked why I'm still here and that's the truth. I'm here because of you." Tess stood up slowly, crossing the room to where he sat. She stopped in front of him, and Isaac rose to his feet, uncertain of what she was thinking. "It's not too soon," she said softly. "Or maybe it is by conventional standards, but nothing about us has been conventional from the start. You rode into my life on the worst day I'd had in years, and somehow you made it bearable. You've been patient and kind and understanding. You've helped me remember that life doesn't end just because someone we love dies." She reached up and gently touched his face, her hand warm against his cheek. "I think about you constantly. About your smile, your voice, the way you always seem to know what I need before I do. I've been afraid to examine those feelings too closely because I don't know if I can trust them. Am I drawn to you because of who you are, or because you were there when I needed someone? Does it have to be one or the other?" Isaac asked, covering her hand with his own. "Can it be both?" Tess smiled, and it was the first truly joyful expression he'd seen from her. "I suppose it can." Isaac leaned down slowly, giving her plenty of time to pull away if she wanted. She didn't. Their lips met in a gentle kiss that sent warmth flooding through his entire body. It was brief, tender, full of promise and possibility. When they pulled apart, Tess was crying, but these were different tears than the ones he'd first seen in the cemetery. These were tears of relief, of hope, of something new beginning. "I talked to Lily today," Tess said, wiping at her eyes. "At the cemetery, I mean. I told her about you. About how you make me feel. I asked her if it was okay, if she'd be angry with me for moving forward. And I swear, Isaac, I felt this sense of peace wash over me, like she was giving me permission to be happy again." Isaac pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "I think she wants you to live, Tess. Fully live, not just exist." They stood like that for a long time, wrapped in each other's arms in the quiet dress shop. Outside, the Kansas wind whistled through the streets of Great Bend. But inside they were warm and safe and beginning to believe in the possibility of a future neither had expected to find. The following weeks were a revelation. They continued working together at the shop, but now there was an acknowledged affection between them. Isaac would steal kisses when no customers were around. Tess would reach for his hand as they walked to and from her house. They talked about everything, their hopes and fears, their dreams for the future. Isaac had written to the ranch in Colorado, explaining that his plans had changed. They'd written back understanding, though the foreman had joked that it must be a very special reason to keep a good ranch hand away. Isaac had smiled when he read that letter. They had no idea how special Tess truly was, but not everyone in Great Bend was happy about their relationship. Thomas Garrett, Lily's former fiancé, stopped by the shop one cold November afternoon. Isaac had seen him around town, but they'd never been formally introduced. "I need to speak with Teresa," Thomas said, his face set in hard lines. Isaac called Tess from the back room, and she emerged looking surprised. "Thomas, I wasn't expecting you. Can we talk privately?" Thomas asked, shooting a pointed look at Isaac. "Anything you need to say, you can say in front of Isaac," Tess replied calmly. Thomas's jaw tightened. "Fine, I think it's disrespectful what you're doing. Lily's not even been dead 3 months, and you're carrying on with some drifter you barely know." Tess's face paled, but her voice was steady. "I understand you're grieving, Thomas. I know you loved Lily, but my relationship with Isaac has nothing to do with my love for my sister, doesn't it?" Thomas shot back. "She was planning her wedding, planning her life with me, and now you've replaced her with the first man who showed you attention." "That's enough," Isaac said firmly, stepping forward. "I know you're hurting, but you don't get to speak to Tess like that." "And who are you to tell me anything?" Thomas demanded. "You show up out of nowhere, take advantage of a grieving woman, and now you're playing house with her. Everyone in town is talking about it. Let them talk, Tess said, her voice gaining strength. Thomas, I'm sorry you lost Lily. I'm sorry we both lost her, but I won't apologize for finding happiness again. I won't apologize for moving forward with my life. Lily would want that for me. She would want me to live. You don't know what she'd want, Thomas said bitterly. You're just using that as an excuse to justify your behavior. I know my sister better than anyone else in this world, Tess replied firmly. We shared everything, felt everything together. And I know with absolute certainty that she would be happy for me right now. I'm sorry if that's hard for you to accept, but it's the truth. Thomas looked between them, pain evident in his eyes. Finally, he shook his head. I can't do this. I can't watch you replace her like she never mattered. I'm not replacing anyone, Tess said quietly. That's not how love works. My heart has room for both my memories of Lily and my feelings for Isaac. One doesn't diminish the other. But Thomas was already walking out, the door slamming behind him. Tess sagged against the counter and Isaac immediately moved to support her. I'm sorry, he murmured. I know that was hard. He's in pain, Tess said, her eyes bright with unshed tears. He's lashing out because he doesn't know what else to do with all that grief. I understand it, but it still hurts. You think he's right? Isaac asked carefully. About it being too soon. Tess turned to face him fully, taking both his hands in hers. No. I think grief doesn't follow a schedule. I think love doesn't follow a schedule. I think life is unpredictable and short and precious, and when you find something real, you hold on to it. Isaac kissed her then, deep and slow, pouring all his feelings into the gesture. When they finally pulled apart, Tess was smiling despite her tears. I love you, she said simply. I don't know when it happened exactly, or if it was all at once or gradually. But I love you, Isaac Xavier, and I'm not ashamed of that. I love you too, Isaac replied, his voice thick with emotion. More than I thought it was possible to love someone after such a short time. They closed the shop early that day and walked to the cemetery together. It was the first time Isaac had accompanied Tess to visit Lily's grave since that first day. The wooden cross had been replaced with a proper headstone now, carved with Lily's name and dates. Tess knelt beside the grave, and Isaac stood respectfully back, giving her space. He watched as she arranged fresh flowers and spoke softly, words meant only for her sister. After several minutes, she gestured for him to come closer. Lily, Tess said, looking at the headstone, I want you to meet Isaac properly. He's the man I told you about, the one who stopped when he saw me crying that first day, the one who's helped me find my way back to living. She looked up at Isaac with such love that it took his breath away. The man I'm going to marry if he'll have me. Isaac's heart stuttered in his chest. Tess. That wasn't a proposal, she said quickly, a flush creeping into her cheeks. I mean, not exactly. I just meant that I could see a future with you, that I wanted one. But if that's too fast, if you're not ready for that kind of talk. Isaac dropped to his knees beside her, taking her face in his hands. It's not too fast. And yes, when the time is right, I want to marry you. I want to build a life with you here in Great Bend. I want to help you run the shop and grow old with you and honor your sister's memory together. They kissed again, right there beside Lily's grave, and Isaac could swear he felt a warmth in the air that had nothing to do with the temperature. A blessing, perhaps, from the sister who wanted nothing but happiness for her twin. As winter settled over Kansas, Isaac and Tess's relationship deepened. He moved out of the boarding house and into a small room above the shop, keeping things proper while courting her in the traditional way. He took her to church socials and town dances. He learned to endure the gossip and the curious stares, knowing that their relationship was strong enough to withstand external judgment. In December, he officially proposed with a simple gold band he'd commissioned from the local jeweler. They were having dinner in her kitchen when he pulled out the ring, his hands shaking slightly with nervousness. "I know we've talked about this," he said, "but I want to do it properly. Teresa Jane Johnson, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Tess's eyes filled with happy tears. "Yes. 1,000 times yes." They married in January of 1882, a small ceremony in the local church with a handful of friends present. Thomas Garrett didn't attend, but he'd stopped by the shop the week before to offer grudging congratulations and an apology for his harsh words. Tess had forgiven him with grace, understanding his grief in ways few others could. The dress Tess wore was one she and Lily had designed together years ago, a gown they'd imagined for their eventual weddings. Wearing it felt like having Lily present in spirit, participating in the joy of the day, even though she couldn't be there in body. After the ceremony, as they stood outside the church accepting congratulations, Isaac pulled Tess close and whispered in her ear, "I promise to make you happy for the rest of our lives." "You already have," Tess replied, kissing him softly. They honeymooned in Kansas City for a week, a luxury they could barely afford but deemed worth the expense. It was Tess's first time traveling beyond Great Bend, and Isaac delighted in showing her the sights of the larger city. They stayed in a modest hotel, explored the streets hand in hand, and talked long into the nights about their dreams for the future. "I want to expand the shop," Tess said one evening as they lay in bed, wrapped in each other's arms. "Maybe take on an apprentice, teach someone the trade the way my mother taught Lily and me. I want to honor my sister's memory by keeping the business growing." "I think that's a wonderful idea," Isaac said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "What about children? Do you want a family?" Tess was quiet for a moment. "Yes," she said finally. "I do. I want to fill our lives with love and noise and chaos. I want to give our children the kind of childhood Lily and I had, full of laughter and security and knowing they're loved." "Then that's what we'll do," Isaac promised. They returned to Great Bend, ready to build their life together. Isaac legally became a co-owner of the shop, contributing his savings to renovate and expand. They knocked down a wall to create more workspace and added display windows to showcase their finest pieces. Business grew steadily as word spread about the quality of their work. True to her word, Tess took on an apprentice in the spring, a young woman named Mary who showed real talent with a needle. Training Mary gave Tess a sense of purpose beyond just completing orders, and Isaac watched with pride as his wife flourished in her role as teacher and mentor. In June, Tess discovered she was pregnant. They'd been hoping for a child but trying not to expect it too soon. The news filled them both with overwhelming joy tempered by Tess's grief that Lily would never know her niece or nephew. "She knows," Isaac assured her, holding her as she cried happy and sad tears simultaneously. "Somehow, wherever she is, she knows and she's celebrating with us." The pregnancy was difficult at times, with Tess experiencing severe sickness in the early months. Isaac was endlessly patient, bringing her dry crackers and ginger tea, holding her hair when she was ill, rubbing her feet when they swelled. He took over more of the physical work in the shop, insisting Tess rest as much as possible. As her belly grew, so did their excitement. They spent evenings discussing names and making plans for the nursery they were creating in the small house behind the shop. Isaac built a cradle with his own hands, sanding it smooth and painting it a soft cream color. "What if I'm not a good mother?" Tess worried aloud one night as they prepared for bed. "What if I don't know what to do?" "Then we'll figure it out together," Isaac said, kissing her rounded stomach. "Neither of us knows what we're doing, but we'll learn. And we have each other, which is more than many parents have." Their son was born on a cold February morning in 1883, arriving after a long and difficult labor that terrified Isaac even as he tried to appear calm for Tess's sake. When the midwife finally placed the squalling infant in his arms, Isaac felt something shift inside him, a love so fierce and immediate that it brought tears to his eyes. "He's perfect," he whispered, carrying the baby to where Tess lay exhausted but radiant. "He has your eyes," Tess said softly, touching their son's tiny hand. "What should we name him?" They discussed many options but never quite decided. Now, looking at their newborn son, Isaac knew exactly what his name should be. "What about Lawrence?" he suggested. "Larry for short, after Lily." Not as a replacement, but as a way to honor her memory. Tess's eyes filled with tears. "Lawrence, yes, Lawrence Isaac Xavier." She looked down at their son. "Welcome to the world, little Larry. Your Aunt Lily would have loved you so much." Parenthood transformed their lives in ways both wonderful and challenging. Larry was a fussy baby, keeping them awake many nights with his crying. But every smile, every milestone, every moment of watching him grow filled them with wonder. The shop continued to thrive, with Mary proving herself an invaluable employee who could handle much of the day-to-day work, while Tess focused on the more complex projects and caring for Larry. Isaac managed the business side and handled customers, finding he had a knack for sales that surprised everyone, including himself. On Larry's first birthday, they held a party in the house, inviting their friends and neighbors to celebrate. As Isaac watched Tess laughing with their guests, their son on her hip, he marveled at how much had changed in just over 2 years. He'd ridden into Great Bend a drifter with no plan beyond the next job, and now he had a wife, a son, a thriving business, and a community he belonged to. That evening, after everyone had left and Larry was asleep in his cradle, Isaac and Tess walked to the cemetery together. It had become their tradition to visit Lily's grave on important occasions, sharing their news with her as if she could hear. "We've been married 1.5 years now," Tess told the headstone. "And we have a beautiful son who looks more like Isaac every day. The shop is doing well. We're happy, Lily. So happy. I wish you could see it all, could be here to share it with us, but I feel you sometimes in quiet moments. I like to think you're watching over us, proud of what we've built." Isaac added his own silent thanks, grateful for the day he'd chosen to ride through this cemetery, grateful for the impulse that had made him stop and speak to a grieving woman. That one choice had changed the entire trajectory of his life in the best possible way. The years passed with the comfortable rhythm of a life well lived. Larry grew from a fussy baby into a rambunctious toddler, and then a curious little boy who loved to play in the shop, arranging and rearranging the buttons and thread spools while his parents worked. When Larry was 3, Tess became pregnant again. This pregnancy was easier than the first, and in the autumn of 1886, they welcomed a daughter they named Lily Rose Xavier. Tess wept as she held her daughter for the first time, overwhelmed by the rightness of giving her sister's name to this new life. "She looks like you," Isaac observed, studying the infant's delicate features. "And like Lily, I imagine." "She does," Tess agreed. "It's like having a piece of her back in a way, not a replacement but a connection to her memory." Little Lily, as they called her to distinguish her from her aunt, proved to be an easier baby than Larry had been. She slept through the night early and had a sunny disposition that charmed everyone she met. Larry adored his little sister, often trying to help take care of her in ways that were more hindrance than help, but always well-intentioned. The shop expanded again, taking over the storefront next door when it became available. They now employed 3 seamstresses in addition to Mary, who had become more of a partner than an employee. The Johnson name, now Xavier, was known throughout Kansas for quality dressmaking and fair prices. Isaac sometimes thought about the ranch in Colorado, about the life he might have led if he'd never stopped in Great Bend. It seemed like a pale shadow compared to what he had now. He'd found something he'd stopped believing existed after his family died, a reason to put down roots, to build something lasting, to open his heart to love despite the risk of loss. You ever regret it? Tess asked him one evening as they sat on their porch watching the children play in the yard. Giving up the cowboy life to be a shopkeeper in a small Kansas town. Never, Isaac said firmly, pulling her close. This life, with you and our children, is better than anything I could have imagined for myself. You saved me, Tess, as much as I like to think I helped you. We saved each other, Tess corrected gently. That's what love does. It meets us in our broken places and helps us heal. As their 10th wedding anniversary approached in 1892, Isaac planned a surprise party with help from their friends and employees. Tess had been working hard on a particularly complex order, and he wanted to show her how much he appreciated everything she did for their family and business. The party was held in the expanded shop after hours, with food and music and decorations that Tess exclaimed over when she arrived. Larry, now 9 years old, and Lily, almost 6, had helped with the preparations, barely able to contain their excitement about the surprise. I can't believe you did all this, Tess said, her eyes shining as she looked around at the gathered friends and neighbors. You deserve to be celebrated, Isaac said, taking her hand and leading her to the makeshift dance floor. You've built an amazing life, an amazing business. You've raised 2 incredible children. You've honored your sister's memory while creating something entirely your own. I'm in awe of you, Isaac Xavier. They danced as the small band played, surrounded by the people who'd become their community. Isaac caught Thomas Garrett's eye across the room and nodded respectfully. Thomas had eventually remarried and now had children of his own. He'd made peace with Tess and Isaac's relationship, understanding that grief and love could coexist in complicated ways. Later that night, after the guests had left and the children were asleep, Isaac presented Tess with his anniversary gift. It was a small painting he'd commissioned from a traveling artist, showing the cemetery where they'd first met. In the painting, a cowboy on horseback approached a woman kneeling by a grave, the scene rendered in soft colors that captured both the sadness and the hope of that moment. It's beautiful, Tess whispered, tears streaming down her face. It's perfect. Thank you for stopping that day, Isaac. Thank you for seeing me when I felt invisible in my grief. Thank you for letting me in, Isaac replied, for trusting me enough to share your pain and eventually your heart. They made love that night with the tenderness of long familiarity and the passion that had never faded between them. Afterward, wrapped in each other's arms, Tess said, I want another baby, one more to complete our family. Isaac kissed her softly. Then let's make that happen. Their 3rd child, a son they named Michael, was born in the summer of 1893. The birth was complicated, and the doctor warned them that Tess shouldn't risk another pregnancy. They accepted this with grace, grateful for the 3 healthy children they'd been blessed with. Michael was a quiet baby, content to observe the world around him with serious eyes. Larry and Lily doted on their new brother, fighting over who got to hold him or help with his care. The house was full of noise and love, and the beautiful chaos Tess had once dreamed of creating. As the children grew, Isaac made sure they knew about their Aunt Lily. He and Tess told stories about her, visited her grave regularly, kept her memory alive in ways that were natural and healthy. Young Lily, who shared her aunt's name, seemed to feel a special connection to the sister she'd never met. You think she watches over us? 8-year-old Lily asked one day as they stood by the grave. I do, Tess said, stroking her daughter's hair. I think she's very proud of you, of all of you, and I think she's happy that our family grew from such sad beginnings into something beautiful. The 20th century arrived with fanfare and celebration. Great Bend had grown significantly over the years, connected now by railroad and telegraph to the wider world. The shop had evolved with the times, now offering ready-made clothing in addition to custom work, employing a dozen people and occupying an entire building on Main Street. Isaac was now 50 years old, his dark hair threaded with silver, but he'd never felt more vital or alive. Watching his children grow into fine young people filled him with pride. Larry at 18 was considering attending university to study business. Lily at 15 was showing real talent as a seamstress, learning the trade from her mother just as Tess had learned from hers. Michael at 8 was still discovering his interests, but showed an aptitude for mathematics that impressed his teachers. On a warm spring day in 1902, 21 years after that fateful first meeting, Isaac and Tess returned to the cemetery alone. They'd snuck away from the shop and the children, needing some time just for themselves. "Hello, Lily," Tess said softly, kneeling by the now weathered headstone. "It's been a while since I've visited. Life keeps us so busy these days. But I think about you constantly, wonder what you'd be doing if you were still here. You'd probably have a house full of children of your own. Thomas's wife, maybe. Or maybe you'd have married someone else entirely. Maybe you'd be running the shop with me, our children growing up together." Isaac stood behind her, his hand on her shoulder, offering silent support. "I hope I've done right by you," Tess continued. "I hope the life I've built would make you proud. I named my daughter for you, taught her the skills you and I learned together. I've tried to live fully, to embrace joy even when grief threatened to drown me. I've loved Isaac with everything I have, raised children who know your name and your story. I've kept the shop going, kept your dream alive." She paused, wiping tears from her eyes. "But most of all, I hope you know I never forgot you. You were my other half, my twin soul, and losing you broke something in me that never fully healed. But Isaac helped me understand that broken things can still be beautiful, that scars are just evidence of survival. He gave me a life worth living when I thought I'd never feel whole again." Isaac helped her to her feet, holding her close as she cried. After all these years, the grief still surfaced sometimes, though it no longer consumed her the way it once had. It had become part of the fabric of who she was, woven into her story rather than defining it entirely. "Thank you," Tess whispered to Isaac, "for everything, for stopping that day, for staying, for loving me through the grief and beyond it, for giving me a family and a future I never thought I'd have." "Thank you for trusting me enough to let me in," Isaac replied, "for showing me that home isn't a place, it's people, for giving me a reason to stop drifting and start living." They walked back through the cemetery hand in hand, the afternoon sun warm on their faces. In the distance, they could see Great Bend spread out before them, the town that had become their home, the place where their unexpected love story had taken root and flourished. That evening, they gathered their children for a family dinner, a tradition they maintained despite busy schedules. As Isaac looked around the table at his wife and the 3 lives they'd created together, he felt overwhelming gratitude for the path his life had taken. "I want to tell you all something," he said, causing the dinner conversation to pause. "I want you to know that the best decision I ever made was stopping in a cemetery 21 years ago and asking your mother to tell me about the person she'd lost. That one moment of compassion, of reaching out to a stranger in pain, gave me everything I have now. Remember that, all of you. Remember that kindness matters, that small choices can change entire lives, that love can grow in the most unexpected places." Larry, Lily and Michael listened attentively, understanding the weight of their father's words even if they couldn't fully grasp the depth of emotion behind them. "Tell us again how you met," young Lily urged, though she'd heard the story dozens of times. Tess smiled, reaching for Isaac's hand across the table. "I was at my lowest point," she began, her voice strong and clear. "Drowning in grief, convinced I'd never feel anything but pain again. And then this cowboy rode through the cemetery, saw me crying, and instead of looking away like most people would, he stopped. He asked me to tell him about the person I'd lost, and that simple question, that willingness to bear witness to my pain, was the beginning of everything. I didn't know then that she'd become the love of my life," Isaac added. "I just knew I couldn't ride past someone suffering without at least trying to help. The job I was riding toward in Colorado seemed less important than staying with this grieving woman, even for just a little while." "And he stayed," Tess continued, squeezing Isaac's hand. "Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. He helped me keep the shop running when I couldn't think straight. He reminded me that life was worth living. He showed me that opening your heart again after loss doesn't mean forgetting the people you've loved. It means honoring them by embracing joy when it comes." "I wish I could have met Aunt Lily," young Lily said wistfully. "She would have loved you," Tess assured her daughter. "She would have loved all of you, and in a way she made all of this possible. Without her death, as terrible as that sounds, I never would have been in that cemetery that day. Your father never would have stopped. Our paths never would have crossed. So even though she's gone, her life and death shaped our family in profound ways." The children seemed to understand, nodding solemnly. They'd grown up hearing about their Aunt Lily, visiting her grave, understanding that she was part of their family story even though they'd never known her. As the years continued to pass, Isaac and Tess grew old together with grace and gratitude. The shop eventually passed to young Lily, who renamed it Xavier and Daughter Dressmakers, and ran it with the same dedication her mother and aunt had shown. Larry became a successful businessman in Kansas City, but visited often with his wife and children. Michael became a teacher, finding fulfillment in educating the next generation. Isaac and Tess retired in their 60s, spending their days tending a small garden, reading, and enjoying their growing number of grandchildren. They still visited Lily's grave regularly, though the walks there grew slower as their bodies aged. "You think we'll see her again?" Tess asked one evening as they sat on their porch watching the sunset. "When we die, do you think we'll be reunited?" "I hope so," Isaac said honestly. "I'd like to thank her properly for being part of what brought us together, and I know how much you've missed her all these years." "I have," Tess admitted. "But loving you and raising our children eased that ache in ways I didn't think possible. She'll always be part of me, but you gave me a life beyond the grief. That's the greatest gift anyone could have given me." Isaac Xavier died peacefully in his sleep in 1915 at the age of 62, his wife holding his hand. Tess mourned him deeply, but with a strength born of experience. She'd learned long ago how to carry grief while still choosing to live, how to honor the dead while celebrating life. She lived another 8 years, surrounded by children and grandchildren who adored her. In her final days, weak but clear-minded, she gathered her family around her. "I've had a good life," she told them. "A life I never expected to have after Lily died. Your father gave me that life by being brave enough to stop and compassionate enough to stay. Remember him with love. Remember your Aunt Lily with love. But most importantly, remember to live fully, to embrace love when you find it, to be kind to strangers because you never know how much they might need it." Teresa Jane Xavier died on a spring morning in 1923, at peace and ready to move on. She was buried between her husband and her sister, the three of them together at last. The headstones told a story of love and loss, of unexpected connections and lives well lived. Young Lily, now a grown woman with children of her own, stood at the graves of her mother, father, and namesake aunt, reflecting on the extraordinary story that had brought them all together. Her father's simple act of kindness in stopping to help a grieving stranger had created a legacy of love that extended through generations. She thought about how different everything would have been if Isaac had simply ridden past that day, if he'd looked away from someone else's pain like so many people did. But he hadn't. He'd stopped, he'd asked, he'd stayed. And in doing so, he'd changed not just his life and her mother's life, but the lives of everyone who came after them. As Lily walked away from the graves, her own children following behind her, she made a silent promise to honor that legacy. To be the kind of person who stopped for strangers in pain, to choose compassion over convenience, to understand that the smallest acts of kindness could ripple forward in ways impossible to predict. The cemetery in Great Bend, Kansas, remained a quiet place where the wind whispered through the grass and the dead rested peacefully. But it was also a place where 3 headstones told a love story for the ages, a testament to the transformative power of compassion, the healing nature of love, and the beautiful unpredictability of life. Isaac had ridden into town a drifter with no plans beyond the next job. He'd left it, decades later, a man who'd built a life rich with love, family, and purpose. All because he'd seen a woman crying over a grave and made the simple but profound choice to ask her about the person she'd lost. And Tess, drowning in grief and convinced she'd never feel whole again, had found not just love but a reason to embrace life fully. She'd learned that the heart had infinite capacity, that loving someone new didn't diminish the love for those lost, that joy and sorrow could coexist in beautiful and complicated ways. Their story became legend in Great Bend, passed down through generations as an example of unexpected love and the courage it takes to open your heart after loss. Parents told it to their children, who told it to their own children, each retelling emphasizing different aspects, but always coming back to the central truth at its heart. Love finds us in the most unexpected places and times. Sometimes it arrives on horseback through a cemetery, carried by a stranger who chooses compassion over convenience. And sometimes all it takes to change your entire life is the courage to stop, to see someone else's pain, and to simply ask them to share their story. The dress shop continued to operate well into the 20th century. A fixture on Great Bend's Main Street that employed generations of local women and maintained a reputation for quality that extended throughout Kansas and beyond. Inside, photographs adorned the walls showing the shop's history, including a treasured image of Isaac and Tess on their wedding day, young and hopeful, embarking on a life neither had planned but both embraced fully. The Johnson sisters had started the business with dreams of creating beautiful things and supporting themselves independently. Tess had carried on that dream after losing Lily, eventually expanding it beyond anything they'd initially imagined. But the true legacy wasn't the business itself. It was the love story that had saved both her and Isaac, giving them something precious and lasting to build their lives around. On quiet evenings, when the shop was closed and the streets of Great Bend settled into peaceful darkness, you could almost imagine you heard voices from the past. A cowboy asking a grieving woman to tell him about her lost sister. A woman finding the courage to speak her pain aloud to a stranger. 2 hearts beginning to heal and then, unexpectedly, to love. It was a story written in fabric and thread, in cemetery visits and whispered memories, in children raised and grandchildren cherished. A story that proved the Wild West wasn't just about outlaws and shootouts, cattle drives and lawmen. Sometimes it was about the quiet heroism of choosing kindness, the bravery of loving again after loss, and the extraordinary ordinary moments that change everything. Isaac and Tess had found each other on the worst day of her life and turned it into the beginning of something beautiful. They'd built a family, a business, and a legacy of love that extended far beyond their own years. They'd shown that home isn't where you're born or where you're heading. It's where you choose to stop, to stay, to plant roots and let love grow. And it all started with a simple question in a Kansas cemetery, on a dusty September afternoon in 1881, when a cowboy saw a woman crying and chose not to look away. "Tell me about them," he'd said. And in answering, she'd found not just an audience for her grief but a partner for her life. A man who would stand beside her through joy and sorrow, raising children and building dreams until their own final days when they'd be laid to rest in that same cemetery where everything began. The wind still whispers through Great Bend, carrying stories of the past forward into the future. And somewhere in that wind, if you listen carefully, you might hear the echo of a love story that started with compassion and grew into something that touched countless lives across generations. A reminder that in a world often harsh and unforgiving, especially in the rough reality of the Wild West, love and kindness could still triumph. They could still transform lives. They could still create beauty from ashes and hope from despair. Isaac and Tess had proved that, lived it every day of their lives together. And their story, carved in headstones and carried in hearts, ensured that their truth would never be forgotten. Love finds us when we least expect it, sometimes in our darkest hours, and when it does, we have to be brave enough to embrace it, to trust it, to let it heal and transform us. That was the lesson. That was the legacy. That was the gift they left behind, more precious than any material wealth, more lasting than any building or business. They'd shown that a chance encounter could become destiny, that a moment of compassion could change everything, and that love, when nurtured with patience and grace, could grow strong enough to weather any storm and create something beautiful that lasted far beyond a single lifetime.